welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made my tulip cardigans. This process will involve making one rectangular back panel, two rectangular front panels, two separate sleeves, and using the tails of the sleeves to sew everything together. I try to make all of my tutorials very beginner friendly, so I will put timestamps in the video for anyone who doesn't need to go as slow. This pattern only involves double crocheting except for the sleeve cuff ribbing, which is single crochet in the back loop only, but that's optional if you want to do the sleeves a different way, and some slip stitching to sew parts together. I am using weight 4 acrylic yarn and a 5.5 hook. It takes about 800 yards for the base color and 200 for the green color and the flower color, which I'm doing in white today. To start, we're going to make a slip knot. You don't need a very long tail for the beginning. We will have a long tail for the sleeve for sewing purposes, but we don't have to worry about that yet. We are going to chain multiples of 3. Tulip patterns are technically usually multiples of 3 plus 1, but we're also adding 2 turning chains, so the extra chain plus the turning chains equals 3 anyway. I'm going to put a screenshot of the size guide that I follow, and that's how wide you'll make your chain. But our cardigan will have more leniency in these sizes since it will stretch. If your multiple of 3 is in between 2 measurements listed, then it's fine to make it an inch larger or smaller, depending on the fit that you like. For example, I'm making a size large and chaining 81, which for me lands in between a large and an extra large. I like loose fitting cardigans, so that's fine with me. So like I said, I'm making a large and I'm chaining 81, which is a multiple of 3 originally as 78, and then I'm adding 1 to that, so it's 79, and then I'm adding 2 turning chains to that, and that makes it 81. So you can base the number of chains that you're doing off of mine, depending on what size you're doing. Since I'm doing a large of 81, then if you're doing an extra large, then you can just start by chaining 81 and then adding 3 to that and measuring it and seeing if that is the right size or if you have to add 3 more. And once you have chained your multiple of 3, we are going to skip 2. Like I said, we're doing a turning chain of 2, and that's because we're doing double crochets. So we basically need those 2 extra stitches to give us the room to do a double crochet. So here is the first one that I'm skipping. And here's the second one that I'm skipping, and I'm going into the third one with a double crochet. And now we're going to double crochet all the way across. And now that I'm at the end of my row, I'm just doing my last double crochet, and we are going to chain 2 and turn our work and just do the same thing all the way back to the other end. So we are doing 4 rows in total of just double crochets. So we've already done 1, so we're doing 3 more. This is customizable because the amount of rows of just plain double crochet in your base color is going to determine how often the tulip rows come in, because in the end we're going to have 5 rows of tulips on the body of our cardigans. If you want your tulip rows to come up more often, then you could do just 2 rows of double crochet in your base color. It does have to be an even number though, so don't do 3 or 1 or anything like that. If you want to go smaller, it has to be 2, and then you can also go bigger so that it's even more spaces in between the tulip rows. The reason it has to be even is because the tulips have a little bit of a puff to them. And so to make sure that the puffs are always facing the same way, the rows in between the tulips have to be even. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing my double crochet rows until I have 4 rows, and then I will meet you guys back to start doing the green part. Now that I'm at the end of my 4th row, I'm going to start the color change into green. So I'm going to go into my last double crochet in my base color and just do half of a double crochet. And then right before you would do the second yarn over and pull through, you're going to drop the base color and start with your green color. I make a slip knot just to make sure it's secure. And then just pull the green into that space and pull them both tight. And for the next row, on every green row, we're going to chain 4. And then before I move on, I just cut off the base color yarn and knot them together. The green row is the only row that you can't really crochet over your tails, which I know is annoying because that means you have to weave them in at some point. I try to weave them in as I'm going along the project instead of saving them all for the end, but that's just my own preference. You can save yours for the end if you want. All the other color changing rows, we are able to just crochet over them. So our chain 4 is going to count as a double crochet. The green row is the only row that we're chaining 4 and having it count as a double crochet. All the other rows will just be normal chain 2 without counting them as a double crochet. So after the chain 4, we are going to do a double crochet right into the first stitch possible. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches next to it and go into the 3rd stitch with a double crochet, chain 2, and a double crochet. This is creating the V shape of the bottom of the tulip, or like the stem part, and creating enough space for the top of the tulip to work into in our next row. So we do the same thing, skip 2 and go into the 3rd, double crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet. Skip the next 2 and go into the 3rd with a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. Now that I'm at the end, there's 2 here left for me to skip and 1 left to go into. I will say that if you did your math wrong and you are short 1 stitch and maybe you only have 1 stitch left to skip, you could really go into the chain 2 that you were doing before. Like, we normally wouldn't go into that because it's not a stitch that we want to go into. We didn't count it as a double crochet. But if you made a mistake and don't want to go all the way back, you could just do that. I've done that before. And now I've stopped right before the last yarn over and pull through because we're changing colors again. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut off the green right away and get my flower color. And now I'm going to do the same thing that we did at the last color change. Make a slip knot of the new color and add it right on to the end of that double crochet. And this time we're only chaining 2. And then before I keep going, I knot these together just to be extra secure. And this time we can crochet over it. So we're going to turn our work, hold the tails so that we can crochet over them easily. And we are going to do a double crochet decrease, and we're going to be doing it 5 times to make that bubble shape. So we're yarning over and pulling through once and then stopping before we finish the double crochet like this. And then do that again twice. Do it again 3 times. Do it again 4 times. Do it again 5 times. And then yarn over for the last time to pull all the way through all those stitches. And I did that stitch over this tail. And then I drag the tail through these stitches to get it to the next V shape. So that we can crochet over it again. So now we're chaining 2 to make up for the 2 skip stitches from before. And we're going to do the same thing in the next V shape. We're going over our chain 2 from the last row as well as our tail for now. So just to show again how to do those decreases to make the bubble shape, we're doing the original yarn over, inserting the hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through once, yarn over, insert, pull through twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and then yarn over and pull through all those loops. Then chain 2, bring the tail closer to you to make sure we're really crocheting over it. And we do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on the hook. And then we're pulling through. Chain 2. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pull through. Just keep carrying the tail until there's no tail left to crochet over. That way we don't have to weave in so many ends at the end. So many tails at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where I'm gonna cut off my tails. And you can see that it's making a puff facing the other side. So this is going to be the front side where it puffs out, and then it's kind of indented here on the back side. So we're going to keep doing these double crochet decreases until the end of the row. That's all we do for the flower color. And I'll meet you back at the end of this row when we're changing our colors back to our base colors. And now I'm at the last section of this row where we're going to put our last tulip. I just wanted to show that this last one isn't as obvious of a V shape as the rest of them, because this is where we chained 4 to count as a double crochet. But we still will insert our last tulip stitch into it. And we're changing colors, so before we make our last complete pull through, we are going to add on our next color. So we're going to do the same thing as before with changing the color, insert the new color to finish the last stitch we're doing, pull them both tight, and we're chaining 2 for this, and tie them together. And we're going to turn our work. And what we do for this row to make sure we're back to our regular numbers of multiples of 3 plus 1, we are going to double crochet into the first stitch, which is the top of our first tulip. There's going to be just 1 stitch since it was a double crochet decrease. Even though it's 5 double crochets, they all create 1 stitch because it's a decrease. And then in between the tulips, we make 2 double crochets since we changed 2, and 2 is the number of stitches that we skip. Everything is going to even out. And then I'm going to pull the yarn through the part of the chain 2 that we did so that it's closer to the top of the tulip stitch that we're crocheting into, and then crocheting into the chain 2 space with 2 double crochets. So then there is going to be this space which was our first chain of the chain 2, which looks like something you would want to crochet into, but we don't have to since we double crocheted twice over the chain. So that's why I'm just pulling the yarn through that and just double crochet into the top of the decrease, and then double crochet twice over the chain 2. This is the easiest row to accidentally mess up the numbering. In other words, you're supposed to have the multiples of 3 plus 1, and this is the row where it can most easily go wrong and have you accidentally skipping 1. Like if I have just done the double crochet twice over the chain 2 and then I put the work down for a second, which I actually going to do to cut this off, I often forget to double crochet into the top of the next tulip and go straight into the next chain 2. So you just have to pay close attention on this row because it just seems like the easiest to mess you up with your number of stitches. You'll kind of see that they're in clusters of 3, which is how you know you're on the right track, but it's going to be adding 1 because we started off on top of a tulip and we will end on top of a tulip as well. So that's how it ends up being the multiple of 3 plus 1. But you can always kind of see as you're going along that you're doing clusters of 3, which is just helpful to know that you're still on track for the number of stitches you're supposed to have. Now I'm at the end of the row. There's 1 more tulip to double crochet into, and I'm going to chain 2, enter my work, and now we can just do normal double crochets for the next 3 rows, which is equaling 4 total with the one we've already done, so that there's still even numbers between every tulip row. So from here on out, you're doing the same exact thing over and over again. It's the 4 rows of your base color, and then it's going to be your green row, which is chaining 4 and then double crocheting into the same stitch or into the first stitch, if that's the way you want to look at it. And then you skip 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, skip 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. Then you do the top of the tulip part, which is chaining 2 and double crochet, decreasing with 5 double crochets into all the spaces in between the V's like this, and then chaining 2 and doing the double crochet decrease again. And then it's the row we just did where we double crochet into the top of the tulip once and we double crochet twice over the chain 2s and go into the top of the tulip again once and over again until you reach the end, and then we get to where we are right now. So we're gonna do that over and over again until we have 5 rows of tulips, but we're ending on a base color row. So it's going to be this 5 times, but then plus a base color row on top of that. So it's going to be 5 tulip rows, but with 6 base color rows. So I'm going to keep doing that and meet you all when you have those 5 tulip rows and 6 base color rows, which is going to end up being a big rectangle, which is your back panel. Now that I've done the back panel with the 5 rows of tulips and 6 sections of base color, I am going to chain 1 and cut off the yarn. We're done with the back panel. We don't need a large tail for this either. We will do that on the next 2 panels. We will actually just sew the next 2 panels right onto the back. And now we can just put this to the side so we can work on the 2 front panels. So we are making 2 thinner rectangular panels that are going to be sewn onto the back panel. I didn't want my 2 front panels to exactly meet in the middle. I wanted there to be a bigger gap in between them. So I took my original multiple of 3, which was 78. That was before I added the next 3. You can take whatever multiple of 3 is closest to yours and has an even number just to make the math easier. So mine was 78. In total, I had 81 chains in the back panel, but originally it was 78 and then plus 3. So when I focus on the 78 and then divide that by 2, that is 39. And then to make the panels meet in the middle, you would add 3 to that again to make your plus 1 and then the plus 2 for the turning chain. But I don't want mine to meet in the middle. Like I said, I want a bit of a gap in between them. So I'm not adding 3. I'm just going to be chaining 39. So in other words, you're just dividing your original multiple of 3, whichever one is an even number, dividing that by 2 so that you still get a regular number. And then technically you're taking away 3, but then you're also adding 3 because of the additional 1 plus the turning chain of 2. I hope that makes sense, but if you don't understand the math, it's okay. Just know that you can just completely divide your multiple of 3 that you did for your back panel in half, and that's the number of chains you're doing. So 78 divided by 2 is 39 for me, and that is for the size large. So that is going to be what I'm chaining right now. Don't need a long tail for this one either. We're just chaining our multiple of 3. It still should be a multiple of 3. And this is going to be for both the front panels. So it's 2 separate front panels that will get both sewn on to kind of the shoulder part of the back panel. So here is my chain of 39. And like last time, I'm going to skip the 2 chains that are closest to the hook and double crochet into the 3rd one from the hook. These front panels work up really quickly because they are so short. So we're just going to do the same exact thing as the back panels. Nothing is different. We are going to double crochet all the way down and then make our 4 rows of double crochet. And then we're going to do the tulip rows the exact same way and the exact same number of tulip rows. So it's going to be 6 sections of this part, which is your base color, and 5 sections of tulip rows with the green part and the flower part. You're going to do that same thing for both front body panels, and then I will meet you back. Actually, I'll meet you back after the first one, because after we do one, we're just going to sew it on right away by slip stitching it on so that we don't have to like waste any yarn Just use the yarn that we're already working with. So after the first one, we will sew it on and then work on the second one and then sew that one on. So really, I will see you after the first front panel. Once you reach the end of your first front panel, we are going to keep the yarn on and just chain one. So don't cut off the yarn. Chain one. We are going to bring the back panel in so that we can sew this right on. So here's my back panel, and you want the back side to be facing up towards you. The back side is the part that doesn't have the puffiness of the flower. And then we want the front panel to always be facing the same way. I'm actually going to turn this to make it easier, so the back panel is facing us with still the back side facing up, but the flowers are facing the right way. And I'm just going to pull it down all the way to here, where the top is, where obviously we want to sew, because this is where the top panels are going to meet the back panel. And you're just going to pick one side to start with, and then push this all the way over here so that they're meeting at the top, like this. And so we're still only looking at the back sides of both pieces. The non-puffy sides of flowers are facing up. And then we want to line this up. Once we do it on the other side, it's not going to be a problem because it's going to start right at the beginning. I'm just starting with kind of the harder side so that it's over with, but it's not that hard. It's just you want to count however many stitches you have in your front panel. Just count that many stitches here so that it's lining up. So I started with 39 stitches, but then 2 of those were turning chains. So I know that I have 37 stitches. So I am going to count 37 on the back panel. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, and put my hook right in there, and then put it in here as well, and pull through. But I'm going to put it through again. Let me zoom in so you can see it more clearly so that it's going through both of these. I do the sewing this way to make it kind of just seem easier and seem like we're doing less sewing. But of course, if you kind of find this confusing and can't really visualize it, you can always just cut off the yarn and leave a long tail and just use the tail to sew with a tapestry needle, which we are going to end up doing later for part of the sleeves. But any chance I have that I can just sew things together while they're still attached to yarn, I don't have to do a lot of like cutting and weaving in extra ends and stuff, then I'm going to do it. So I'm just slip stitching along, and every stitch has a stitch behind it that we're going through both of them, and slip stitching through both of them and then through the loop that's on the hook. So through one stitch, through the stitch behind it, and then pull the yarn through both those stitches and through the loop on the hook. More zoomed in this time. Put the hook through one stitch and then the stitch behind it. Pull the yarn through both stitches and then pull it through the loop that's on the hook. That's just a slip stitch, which is mostly used for sewing. We're going to do this all the way across so that these end up being sewn together. But since the back sides are facing us, that means the seam is going to be on the back sides. So in other words, it's going to be on the inside of the cardigan, which is of course what we want for seams. I'm now at the end and doing my last slip stitch, and there already was a tail here from before, so I will just knot my ends together. That's it for sewing on this side, so we can chain one. pull the yarn tight and cut it off. And since I happen to have a tail here, I'm just gonna knot them together and weave both of these in. And then when we slide over, this is gonna be where we put the second front panel. So we're gonna do the same exact thing to make the second front panel, and then we're gonna leave the yarn on so we can do that same exact sewing again. So I'll meet you back with our second front panel when we reach the end of those. Now that I'm done with the second front panel, just like the first one, now I'm going to flip it over so that it's the same as the first panel. They're right next to each other. And this one can just be sewn right from the beginning, so we don't have to do the counting like we did. And we're gonna go into this first stitch like we did before, into the first stitch of the front panel, and slip stitch just like before. We're gonna slip stitch all the way across, and then we can chain one and cut off the yarn when we are done sewing the panels together. And then the only thing that'll be left after that will be to make the sleeves and sew them on, and then do any kind of border we want to do on the cardigan. And if we pull up where we sewed and then fan it out, there is our cardigan shape. We're going to keep it inside out for now until we sew on the sleeves. So we can just fold it and put it to the side, and then we can get started on the sleeves. To do the sleeves, we're going to switch to a 5.25 millimeter hook, and we're going to start off with the cuff of the sleeves. In the past tulip cardigans that I've done, I made the cuff color the same color as the tulip color, and I thought it looked really cute like that. I just didn't want to do that for the one that I'm making today, but I definitely encourage you to think about that because I think it is a cute detail. But today I'm just using the same color as my base color. For the sleeves, there's only going to be a couple of rows of tulips instead of doing it every 4 rows like we were doing in the body of the cardigan. I've done that so that the cardigan as a whole doesn't end up looking so overly busy. I think that just having a couple random rows of tulips on the sleeves makes it kind of ties everything together, but isn't overwhelming. But I'm just saying that so that you know that you don't have to have the same exact spacing as me if you don't want. But first we are starting with the cuffs, which everyone is doing the same. So you're actually going to do a long tail for this one so that we can use it later for sewing. I do my whole wingspan, and it doesn't have to be that long because I am really short. I'm only 4'10", so my wingspan is not that long. And that's how I always do it, so it's this much yarn. So just leave your tail to the side, or you can bunch it up and put a clip on it so that it's not annoying you. And we are going to chain 10 to start off the ribbing for the cuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we are going to single crochet down, skipping the one closest to the hook. So starting in the 9th stitch, we are making 9 single crochets down. And now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And to create the ribbing effect, we are going to continue single crocheting, but we're going to go in the back loop only. So instead of looking on the side of your stitches and going into the hole you normally go into, you're gonna just turn it so the top of your work is facing up at you, and you have this hole here. Let me get a needle. You have this hole here instead of this hole here. This hole in between the V stitch here, and this is the back loop. So you go into that hole, and the back loop is on your hook, and then you just do a single crochet. Into the top hole, single crochet. And you're going to chain one and turn your work and keep doing that in the back loop only, all the way across, 9 single crochets for 24 rows. Now that I have just a couple of rows done, I wanted to show how you count rows when you're doing a ribbing effect. Every raised part, like what I'm showing here, is 2 rows, because the raised part is 1 row, and then the non-raised part is the second row, and then a raised part is 1 row, and then another row. So you can count by twos by just counting the raised parts. So how many rows have I done so far? 2, 4, 6, 8 rows. And when you get to the end, you will end up on the opposite side of your tail, like I am right now. That's how you'll know you've done an even number of rows. So I will meet you back when we all have 24 rows. When you have your 24 rows, it will fit nicely around your wrist with like a little bit of stretch, which is why we changed to the 5.25 hook, because a bigger hook would have been too loose for the cuff. So now to continue on, if you're doing the same color cuff as your base color like I am right now, then we're going to chain 2 and just keep going. But if you did a different color cuff than what the rest of your base color is going to be for the sleeve, then you'll have to chain 1, cut off the yarn, and then just reattach your new color. And then you can go ahead and chain 2 as well. And we are turning and working on the side of the cuff. We're going to be crocheting along here. Crocheting on the side of work can be hard for a beginner, so I'm going to try to show exactly where to put stitches, especially so we all end up being on the same page, because I want us all to end up with 48 stitches. We've done 24 rows, and we are going to be doing double crochet increases, so that means that 24 rows times 2 is 48. So the first spot is going to be right here. Every double crochet is going to be an increase, so 1 double crochet and another double crochet in the same hole. And then I always skip these holes right here. Let me get the needle again. These holes that only have 1 stitch at the top, like this. Just show you closer. These are the ones we're skipping. I know it's not focused. Okay. This is what we're skipping. This, this. Every time it has just 1 stitch. I don't think there's anything wrong with going into those stitches. They're not actually like loose or anything, but that's just how I know what I'm doing and how I stay consistent with my spacing and ending up with the right amount of stitches that I want to end up with. Is just always going in the same spaces. So I skip that, and squeeze into this next section. So in between every one of those types of holes with the one like single thread on the top, there's going to be 2 spaces to push your needle or push your hook into and do a double crochet, except we're double crochet increasing, so it's going to be 4 double crochets in between every one of them. 2 spaces, but 4 double crochets. So we've just done 2 in the same hole. And then there's a space right here, a nice big hole, because there's a post here from the previous, one of the previous rows single crochet. And we're going to do our double crochet increase. And now we've made it to another one of those stitches that we want to skip. And we will find 2 more spaces to put in 2 more increases to make 4 double crochets. There's another one. Skip it and go into these 2 spaces for our 4 double crochets. And once you get to the end, you're going to have 1 more available space, just like there was in the beginning. So make sure you go into that one as well and count the stitches and make sure that you've done 48. Should look like this. We're going to chain 2 and turn our work. And now we're going to do a couple of rows that will ensure that we have the right number of stitches for the tulip stitch. So if you'll remember, we are supposed to have multiples of 3 plus 1. We're all doing the same number no matter what size cardigan we've done. And right now we have 48. And at the end of every row for the next 4 rows, we're going to do 1 increase so that it ends up being 52 stitches. 51 divided by 3 is an even 17. So that's how we know it's a multiple of 3 plus 1. So now that we've turned our work, we are going to just do 1 regular double crochet into every stitch until we get to the end. And the very last stitch is going to be an increase. It will be 2 double crochets in the last stitch, only the last stitch. I'm at the end of my row and I'm going to do my double crochet increase, and then I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work. And we're going to do that same exact thing for the next 3 rows. So double crocheting all the way across, 1 double crochet in every stitch until the last one, and the last one gets 2 double crochets. I'm just finishing up the 5th row, so this is going to be the last time that we have to do an increase at the end. And now we can just double crochet, 1 double crochet in every stitch as normal, keep doing everything as normal. I'm going to do 2 more rows of double crochet before I do a tulip row. I'm only going to end up doing 2 tulip rows in the whole rest of the sleeve. Again, it's up to you what kind of spacing you want to have or how many rows of tulips you want to do for the sleeves, because I just kind of winged it. It wasn't very easy to have even spacing, but I just wanted it to be random anyway. But just a reminder that there should always be an even number of rows in between the tulip rows so that they end up facing the same way. So, like I said, I'm going to do 7 rows in total before I start a tulip row, but then after that, I'm only going to do 6 rows before I start the next tulip row. And then after the second one, I will just double crochet all the way until I finish the sleeve, which will end up being 25 rows.
Hi guys, this is future editing me popping in to say that I actually ended up doing 26 rows, even though I will repeatedly say to do 25. So sorry about that. The goal is to have the tulips facing downward after you finish your last row and turn the work. So I'll show a clip of that in a couple seconds, but I just wanted to warn you. Okay, bye!
This is what it looks like with just the one row of tulips so far. So this was the 7 plain rows, my 1 tulip row, and then 6 plain rows, and another tulip row will go right here. And then the rest will be plain rows until I get to the 25 rows that I need. I am now done with my sleeve. I'm sure that Future Editing Me has already put some updates into the video. I did end up doing 26 rows, not 25. The end goal for the sleeve is to have the tulips facing down while your hook is on your right side so that it can easily be sewn onto the cardigan, because on the cardigan the tulips are facing down because we want the seam to be on the back like we said before. So if you want to do this sewing technique that we've been doing with slip stitching across, then I would just do however many rows it takes to make sure that the tulips are facing down, but somewhere in between 25 rows and 27 rows, or more if you need more length in your sleeve if you're a tall person. Or if you don't care about doing the slip stitch sewing method and you will just sew it anyway, then you're free to do however many rows you want to without worrying about whether the tulips will be facing up or down, and then you can just sew by using a separate piece of yarn. Once you're ready to sew, you can fold your sleeve in half so that you have a middle point, and you want to put a stitch marker there just so you know where it is roughly, and then attach the stitch marker to the side of our panels. So this right here is where we sewed the front and back panels together, and then that's where we're attaching our stitch marker, in the middle of that. And then you can spread the sleeve back out, and this is where we will be slip stitching along. Starting from the right side, I just chained one, and I'm going to insert the hook into the first stitch of the last row of the sleeve and insert the hook into the side of the cardigan panels, and I'm going to just slip stitch along, sewing them together as I go. Once you get to the middle, you can just take the stitch marker out. That was just there as a placement so that we know we're on the right track and that everything is even. And now we are just going to continue slip stitching until we get to the end of the sleeve. Once you make it to the end, you can chain one and cut off the yarn. And to finish sewing the sleeve part, we are going to lift up the whole cardigan and form it into a cardigan shape. So that means folding the sleeve in half, like this. So in this corner here, the armpit is matching the armpit. This is folded in half to make the real sleeve shape. And we're going to take that long tail that we had before and use it to sew up the sleeve and then also down the body of the cardigan. So I'm just taking a tapestry needle and I will just sew this back and forth up the sleeve part first so that it's closing the sleeve, and then down the body so that it's closing the part of the body that we want closed. And once you're done with the sewing, we're going to do the same exact thing to the other sleeve. Don't forget to do as many rows as you need to make sure that the tulips are facing down on the sleeves. I'm sorry that I couldn't get the math to be on my side for that. And once we're done with both sleeves, all we will have left to do is a border. Now that I'm done with my second sleeve, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So we're going on the side of the body of the cardigan, like this. Stitch marker in the middle, and then lay the sleeve out flat. Now that we're done sewing everything together, we can turn it inside out, and then the seams will be on the inside. The last thing I'm going to do is add a border around the front. And if you want to do a border along the bottom as well, especially to add length, then we could go straight from the front border into a bottom border for anyone that wants to do that. So I'm just inserting my hook at the bottom, the very bottom of the front of the cardigan on the right side. I'm using my white this time, and I'm just gonna single crochet in random spots all the way around. I just single crocheted all the way up and I'm at the top now, so I'm just gonna keep single crocheting all the way around. You don't have to chain or anything, you just keep going. And now we're turning and going back down on the left side of the cardigan. I'm at the end now, so I'm just going to chain one and cut off my yarn, but if you want to continue on to make a bottom border, then you can also chain one and then just start single crocheting into the bottom. So you're just chaining one just to have enough room to kind of turn and create a corner. And then you'll single crochet all the way across the whole bottom of the cardigan. And then if you want to do even more rows of bottom border, then you can continue chaining one and doing single crochets or whichever stitch you want to create the bottom border. That's it for today's video. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or I always link my crochet Instagram account, so you can also message me there with any questions, and you can also tag my Instagram if you post your cardigan there. Thanks for watching!